be very brief too, because I'm just as interested in listening to the discussion. But I mean, what Ursula Apitzsch is doing here is really, really very new. It's not the newness of it that's interesting, is that it's opening up entire new territory for exploration in Gramsci and beyond. So I'll make a few comments on what is the crucial, what are the crucial new parts that are opened up. Gramsci himself was aware from very early on that he was, let's say, limited in his formation by a rather undeveloped, let's say, emotional life. And he was very aware of this, and he expressed it in very sort of touching ways after the fact in letters to both Tatiana and Giulia. Now, this means that everything that Ursula Apitzsch said, which is really an exploration of letters that had been ignored far too long, that these have to be read, and everything she explored has to be read alongside the notebooks. And as you were talking, and in fact, when I read your earlier long and wonderful essay, which you wrote as an introduction to the first volume of your letters edition, it occurred to me, and I've been sort of taking notes on this, to examine exactly the parallels, because very often Gramsci's letters, or the reflections he is going through when receiving letters, find a way in the notebooks. And when we say the notebooks contain, and in a sense this is true, virtually no autobiographical elements except the cover, it is not true. It's that they contain, if I may use a word on which Gramsci reflected at length, a form of translation into a language that is no longer personal, but which is the product of a reflection and an elaboration of from the personal to the more, let's say, socio-political and even philosophical. So one of the most pertinent things that Ursula pointed out is precisely that passage from his comment, or negative comment, on ennui d'humain, the relationship between knowledge, understanding, knowledge and feeling. Coming from a person who is very suspicious of feeling, but at the same time is struggling to figure out how to take it into account without lapsing into the thing that throughout the notebooks he is most vigorously opposed to, which is sentimentalism and romanticism. So, to bring this now to education, there is, I think, a particular avenue that I see here suggested by Ursula's exploration, an avenue to develop reflection on the relationship between, first of all, in general, hegemony and education. So that, to what extent is the instance of the repression of Giulia's artistic, creative, musical capabilities, the repression of those in favor of or to be displaced by, politically active revolution activity. To what extent is that, A, the result of hegemony, or, as I would maintain, the result of a coercive system that has replaced the hegemonic, right? Because it is channeling per force in a certain way, rather than making for a reflection that results in a sort of agreement by consent. So to make a leap here, this form of thinking leads to questioning the varieties of meaning that are attached to Gramsci's famous saying, the question of hegemony is a question of education. But secondly, also to his aesthetic reflections. Because in one of the things one notices, there's a notebook, I forgot the number, on literary criticism, which opens with a reflection on the Sanctus. The Sanctus, by the way, is the most influential thinker on Gramsci, and it's a topic that hasn't been written about sufficiently. And the reason for that, let me add also another parenthesis, is because the Sanctus is interested in education, and he wrote an essay which Gramsci regarded as basic. It was called On Science, Meaning Knowledge and Life, Scienza e Vita. Anyway, so in one of the earliest paragraphs in this notebook, Gramsci comes back to the relationship between the political and the aesthetic, and he says, I can't remember word for word, but he says there are those parents who believe that they have in some stereotypical formulae the key to open all doors, meaning that you are, let's say, a Marxist, so you know which texts you can approve of and which texts you're going to disapprove of. And he has the most dismissive remark, dismissive description of these types. He even calls them like unctuous people, but by unctuous he means those people who in Manzoni's novel went around spreading the plague. I mean, that's how disdainful he is. And this is the problem that he is identifying with Giulia. And Ursula, I forgot the phrase when he talks about, like, he says she has a metaphysical error, precisely by thinking that the political is somehow a substitute for, or the correct manner for dealing with what I'm loosely calling the aesthetic, which is her creative and so on and so forth. I will make a couple of quick comments now, just to link to other works. I think it is important to see how what Gramsci as a young person said when watching the reaction in the theater to Ibsen's Doll's House becomes a very living thing for him. I mean, this is obviously something that Gramsci had thought about abstractly, and now he is seeing what is the price, or what is the difficulty really, or the enormous hurdle for the woman to assume a position, not through spontaneity though, but through an articulation to oneself of one's own meaning of oneself. A second connection, one of the most important early essays of Gramsci, where in fact we could discuss later, you could see the degree to which he is attracted to certain aspects of the Enlightenment, is an early essay called Socialism and Culture, in which he uses, as a starting point, an observation from the Scienza Nuova of Vico, where he says the plebeian, those who consider themselves subhuman, right, are liberated not through some political action, but from Solon's dictum, know thyself. The moment Vico says that democracy starts, or the very concept of democracy historically, not just at the moment, starts when somebody, when a group follows Solon's dictum and come to know themselves as humans, and therefore no different, this negation of difference, from the the aristocrats or whatever. At which point you have, according to Vico, the opening up of democratic possibilities. Now Gramsci takes this and says this is what, and he doesn't use subaltern yet, it's not a term he has developed, but this is where socialism starts, with the moment, the liberatory moment starts right there. And later, he says in Americanism and Fordism the same thing, and now he's saying it though to Giulia in a different key, in a personal key. And so the other text one should look at is Americanism and Fordism. I won't elaborate on subalternity because we have read so much, and we can refine those ideas in our discussion.